Ink on His Fingers by Louise Vernon. Chapter 4, Innocent or Guilty. Lorenz dangled a double handful of stolen types in front of Hans's nose. But I didn't take them, Hans began. Johann Gutenberg lifted Hans' chin with a firm hand. Then why did you try to run away? I didn't think anyone would believe me. And when I found Ulrich, he didn't think he'd be believed either. Ulrich? Who's Ulrich? His name is Ulrich Zell, and he's to be your apprentice. That's what he told me, his uncle said. Lorenz whistled. That's right, master. The new lad was to come from Frankfurt. Well recommended and very knowledgeable in his Latin, but why would he steal the types? He didn't, Hans burst out in Ulrich's defense. Someone put them in his bundle. He was talking to a big man in the shop and... I knew it, Lorenz exclaimed. Whenever something strange happens, Herr Fust is somehow always around. Lorenz, enough of that, Johann Gutenberg said. Herr Fust is my partner. Lorenz mumbled something inaudible, but kept quiet. Hans went on with his story and noticed a look of disbelief on Lorenz's face. Too late, Hans remembered that he had not explained why he was in Herr Mueller's workshop. In despair, he asked, You believe me, don't you? He thought of how Ulrich had made the same appeal and made a silent promise not to disbelieve anyone in the future. He grinned in relief when Johann Gutenberg said, Yes, I believe you. By the way, what is your name? Hans Dunn. Hans Dunn? Herr Gutenberg echoed. I knew a goldsmith by that name. That must have been my father, Hans said. He died in June. Johann Gutenberg's face softened in sympathy. So you're Hans Dunn the younger. Your father was a fine man. He did some exacting work for me. I remember I paid him 100 gulden. He sighed and added quickly, He deserved every bit. But wait, that was in Strasbourg. Herr Gutenberg's eyebrows lifted in question. We moved to Mainz last spring, just before Father came down with the fever. Hans swallowed the familiar ache in his throat and pushed back a sudden, astonishing thought. Could Herr Gutenberg be the one Father loaned money to? But no, if Herr Gutenberg had paid Father 100 gulden, he wouldn't turn around and borrow money from him. Besides, Herr Gutenberg was an unmistakable aristocrat. He must be rich. People like him always had income from rents and annuities. Coming back to the business at hand, the constable said to Gutenberg, Do you claim that these types are yours? Yes. Are they all here? Gutenberg examined them. Yes. In that case, gentlemen, if you are satisfied that this young man did not steal these types from you, I shall leave. I have another complaint to work on, a most peculiar charge having to do with metal molds used by goldsmiths. It seems this peddler, who is familiar to you, I'm sure, claims that someone put some metal molds into his pack. Metal molds? Herr Mueller interrupted and started to paw through the pile of metal molds on his work table. Yes, usually these complaints are the other way around. People claim something has been stolen from them. Herr Mueller groaned and clutched his gray hair with both hands. I want to put in such a complaint right now, he howled. Someone has stolen my molds. 5 at least, and I know who. Constable, arrest Herr Fust. He was the one. Herr Fust, the banker? The constable asked, aghast. I can't do that. A thief is a thief, Herr Mueller raged. He's the only one who could have taken them. He was here. I don't trust that man. See, master, Lorenz said in a low voice, I'm not the only one who doesn't trust him. If you have a formal complaint to make, come down to the city hall and make it, the constable said. Gentlemen, I am beginning to wonder if every goldsmith in Mainz isn't working on this process of metal printing. After the men left, the old man sorted out bits of metal and wood. Now, Hans Dunn the younger cut this wood into strips no thicker than half your little finger, and no longer than your palm. I'm going to perfect something that will confound Herr Fust, the banker thief. He can keep my molds. They will do him no good. Herr Mueller chuckled and rubbed his hands. The exacting task tired Hans. Was there this much work to printing with letter types? He hadn't intended to become an apprentice this soon. As time passed, he became more and more desperate. How could he ever get to the monastery to see the prior about leaving school? He regretted his impulse to stop at Herr Mueller's. Why had he allowed the old man to think of him as an apprentice? What could he tell Mother? What if Herr Mueller wouldn't let him go home? The old man fused bits of metal on the wooden strips Hans cut and arranged them into a wobbly line face up. Hans sneaked glances as often as he dared. Herr Mueller daubed ink on the metal and pressed a piece of paper down on the type. Hans saw smudges where the ink had run, but he saw a ragged line of letters too, just as he had done at home, letter by letter. But Herr Mueller imprinted a whole line. Herr Mueller sighed. It just won't work. Let me try, Hans ventured. Herr Mueller shrugged. Hans wiped the metal tips clean of ink. He found a brush among scraps of metal and wood that littered the work table, dipped it into the squat bottle of ink, and traced each reversed metal letter with the same care that he used when he copied prayer missals at the monastery. Could the Bible be copied from metal letters stamped on paper? Would it take any longer? But the metal letters could be used again and again and again. A strange burning understanding quivered to Hans' fingertips. He sat back, absorbed in the wonder of his discovery. Herr Mueller leaned toward him. Put the paper over it, quick, before the ink dries. Hans pressed the paper down. The letters showed up delicate and clear, but uneven. Herr Mueller showed delight. He rubbed his hands together. It can be done. It can be done. Ah, we will show these master craftsmen a thing or two. Now, show me how you inked those letters to make such a clean impression. Hans took up the brush and traced a letter. No, that won't do. We must find a way that does not take so long. Otherwise, why bother using metal letters? An uproar from the dogs sent the old man upstairs. This time the constable and several of his men came into the workshop. I have a warrant for your arrest. The constable, with a flush of embarrassment, unrolled a sheet of paper. For a space of a breath, Hans thought the constable meant him. But this time the constable addressed Herr Mueller. Arrest? Me? Who would do this and why? You owe money to Herr Fust, do you not? Yes, he knows that very well. You signed papers to that effect? Yes, of course. He is now foreclosing. Expressions of rage and bewilderment alternated on Herr Mueller's face. But why? His despairing cry awakened Hans's pity. I am working night and day on this new process, trying to perfect it. What more can a man do? Look, I'll show you. The constable waved the old man aside. I'm sorry. These are my orders, all properly signed, all within the law. My men here will take over now. Herr Fust wants everything moved out. Herr Mueller seemed to shrivel before Hans's eyes. The constable's men began to take out everything movable. Hans saw that he could not be of help. I'll have to go, Herr Mueller. The old man raised one hand in a gesture of farewell. Outside, Hans burned with indignation at the orders of Herr Fust. Why couldn't he wait for his money? Deep in thought, he almost ran into a man. Startled, he looked up and recognized the warm brown eyes and bearded face of the peddler, who did not seem to recognize him. I thought I saw the constable go into Herr Mueller's, the peddler said. Yes, you did. Banker Fust is taking over Herr Mueller's workshop. Banker Fust is doing much mischief in Mainz with connivings and his foreclosures. As if he had said too much, the peddler hurried away. The next morning, Hans tucked the 3 duplicate sheets inside his shirt to show to Brother John. He arrived at the monastery early and asked the gatekeeper if he could talk to the prior. The thought of leaving school now weighed like stone on his mind. How could he have forgotten? But he had to admit that the events of the day before had made him forget. Now it loomed before him like an impassable mountain. The prior is in conference, the gatekeeper said. You had better go on to class. Hans took his place on the straw-covered floor beside his 11 classmates. Soon the monastery classroom buzzed with the drone of Latin chanted aloud. Hans's mind buzzed with all the incidents of the previous day. Was this to be his last Latin class? The monk who taught Latin, a tall, pale man with piercing eyes, pronounced words from his prayer missal. The 12 boys repeated it. Another sentence, longer than the first, hummed through the small, bare room and rebounded from the shuttered windows. Hans mouthed the Latin words in a half-hearted attempt to respond. Where would he be this time tomorrow when he was out of school? Hans let his imagination soar. Why couldn't he learn this mysterious new craft? Better yet, why not ask Herr Gutenberg about it? If he had to quit school, why not become an apprentice in Herr Gutenberg's workshop? Hans done? The unexpected thunder of his name jarred Hans out of his daydream. He stumbled to his feet. You have not joined in with your classmates for the last 5 sentences. Perhaps you feel that you know the church missal sufficiently and need not study further. Hans writhed under the biting sarcasm, but swallowed his anger and shame. Mea culpa. He used the customary Latin phrase to admit his guilt. What would the penance be? Helping lay brother Reuben in the hot kitchen, or carrying out dirty straw from the monks' cells and replacing it with fresh? But on his last day here, what difference did anything make now? Still, he would do well to keep alert. The Latin teacher often rained hearty blows on unwary students. With an effort, Hans forced himself to recite. He had always enjoyed Latin, but not today, when he knew his schooling would be over. He wished it was time for the writing class. Brother John would be interested in the parchment sheets. Perhaps the wise old scholar would advise him about the future. The thought cheered Hans so much that he outdid the others in chanting the Latin sentences. The Latin teacher's face and bald pate glowed pink, a sign, as Hans knew from previous experience, of restrained pleasure. The boys filed in silence down the hall to the scriptorium. Brother John did not arrive. 2 monks whispered together, then led the boys back to the Latin classroom. Hans asked for permission to see the prior. On the way, he heard a clatter of pots and pans in the kitchen. A shriek of protest and the sound of a scuffle aroused his curiosity. He tiptoed to the kitchen archway in time to see Reuben, the cook, tall and lank, twist about the work table like a corkscrew. I've got you now. Reuben grabbed a boy by the ear. To the prior you go. The boy twisted and squirmed. Hans glimpsed his face. Ulrich Zell. Then his new friend must not have found his uncle after all and had come to the monastery. But what a way to be treated! Monks and lay brothers never showed hospitality this way. What was the matter with Reuben? How did you get in? Tell me that. Those walls are twice as high as a man. Reuben gave Ulrich a quick shake. The prior will learn about you, you young thief. Thief again? Was Ulrich to be accused of being a thief wherever he went? Heavy doubt pressed on Hans. Had he been too gullible in believing Ulrich's story about the metal type sticks? Why was Ulrich being called a thief this time? There must be a reason. Hans remembered how he had defended Ulrich. Yet here he was being accused again. Was it possible for people to go through life saying one thing but doing the opposite? This time, Hans refused to be taken in. He made up his mind not to trust Ulrich again.